Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Kindly allow 1 minute for other people to join before we start. Thank you. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruhaina Razak, a manager with the Governance Risks and Compliance Services team at KPMG Ghana, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to today's webinar on strengthening governance, understanding Bank of Ghana's corporate governance guidelines for payment service providers in Ghana. Now, this important session is proudly organized in collaboration with the Ghana FinTech and Payments Association of Ghana as part of our shared commitment to strengthening the foundations of trust, accountability, and sustainability in Ghana's digital financial ecosystem. Now, the financial services industry has seen remarkable growth over the past few years, especially within the fintech and the payment service providers. And now the PSPs are central to the transformation of Ghana's financial ecosystem, especially in expanding access to finance, as well as driving innovative solutions within the payments service ecosystem in Ghana. Now, of course, with the rapid growth also comes the need for strong corporate governance structures to ensure that the PSPs remain resilient, ethical, and responsive to evolving risk within the ecosystem. Now, to that end, the Bank of Ghana has introduced the corporate governance guidelines tailored towards the payment services providers in Ghana. Now, these guidelines are designed to promote sound business practices, protect customer interests, as well as ensure regulatory compliance. Now, the guidelines outline key expectations around board compositions, internal controls, risk management practices, and accountability, which form key essential pillars for a robust corporate governance structure to support the financial ecosystem. And what we are here to do today on this webinar is to unpack these guidelines, discuss their practical implications for PSPs, as well as provide clarity on how PSPs can effectively implement these guidelines ahead of the implementation deadline, which is 31st December 2025. Now, our key goal today is not just to re-emphasize why the need for compliance with these directives, but also to provide support on how to integrate governance as part of strategic tools within the PSP so as to bolster and support business operations for us as payment service providers in Ghana. So to that end, having given some form of introduction on what we seek to expect from this webinar, I would like to call on Mr. Martin Kwame Awaga, who is the president of the Ghana FinTech and Payment Association, to give us the opening remarks before we delve into today's presentation. So Martin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruhaina, and thank you to the KPMG team for giving us this opportunity to work together to, sanitize the industry when it comes to the corporate governance guidelines provided by the Bank of Ghana for the PSPs. Now, it's both an honor and a privilege to welcome you all to this Corporate Governance Roadshow for the PSPs, a critical initiative spearheaded by the association, as earlier mentioned, and KPMG, our partners. Today, we gather as architects of a resilient, transparent, and ethically governed digital financial ecosystem, one that balances innovation with accountability and growth with integrity. So, as outlined in the Payment Systems and Services Act 2019, which is Act 987, the Bank of Ghana has issued a corporate governance guidelines for payment service providers, for which the deadline is December 31st, 2025. These guidelines are not merely regulatory checkboxes. They are a strategic blueprint to ensure the long-term sustainability and the achievements we have been able to make as a digital payments landscape in Ghana. Now, the fintech industry has seen remarkable progress, as earlier mentioned, and which is true, ranging from or starting from mobile money adoption to blockchain experimentation, from cross-border payments to API-driven financial inclusion, and many more. But this progress comes with a non-negotiable responsibility. That is what? To embed robust governance frameworks that protect stakeholders and mitigate risks and uphold public trust in the platforms or the solutions we are providing. Now, one may ask, why does this roadshow matter? What is the importance or significance of this roadshow or project that we are embarking on with KPMG? Now, my response to that is very simple. Now, this roadshow is designed to educate and clarify key provisions of the Corporate Governance Guidelines and their legal basis under the Payment Systems and Services Act. It's also to prepare for compliance. That is to provide actionable insights on board compositions, risk frameworks, AML obligations, and disclosure of requirements ahead of the December 2025 deadline. Now, the third reason for this is to foster an industry-wide best practices, which is to cultivate a culture where governance or corporate governance is viewed not as a burden, but a competitive advantage that drives digital trust and resilience within the fintech ecosystem. Now, one of the things I know would happen today is that the discussions will delve into board and senior management oversight, roles, independence, and ethical leadership, the way we appoint directors and their tenure of work, their qualifications and accountability standards as well. This session also, cover the risks, compliance, and internal controls, as well as how we can strengthen AML frameworks. The last one is the transparency and reporting frameworks and timely disclosures to the Bank of Ghana on the reporting mechanisms. Additionally, we'd also be looking at the transitional roadmap when it comes to practical steps that PSPs, DEMIs, and all the fintechs the categorization of fintechs that form under the or are under the regulatory overview of the Bank of Ghana achieve seamless compliance. Now, to our board members and the CEOs, CFOs, or the C-suite executives here present and compliance officers, your presence reflects a shared commitment to excellence in governance. Now, because of this process, let us move beyond minimum compliance and embrace the full governance structure as the bedrock of innovation and excellence in the fintech ecosystem. So therefore, let us view this roadshow as a catalyst for change and embrace this change. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and leave equipped to implement these standards with confidence. We extend our deepest appreciation to the Bank of Ghana for its visionary leadership and to KPMG for their partnership in driving this initiative. To all participants, your engagement today will shape the future of Ghana's digital financial ecosystem. Together, let us build a future where governance is not just an afterthought, but the foundation of every transaction, innovation, and every milestone we seek to achieve as we reach the last mile. And to top it all, I'd like to say that there are going to be other initiatives that we are going to spearhead with KPMG after this roadshow. We are expecting to have more engagement with the fintechs, for them to assist, or for KPMG to assist in them making sure that they meet the December 2025 deadline. And all this are going to be explained further as we move along. So thank you, and I wish you all a productive, insightful, and transformative session and discussion. Please feel free to ask your questions, and we have all the necessary expertise to respond to them. Let's have an engaging session. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Martin, for that detailed opening remarks and for touching on some of the things that I will touch on subsequently in the next few minutes. So having said that, I would like to touch on the outline for today's presentation briefly before our facilitators take over from this end. All right, so for today's outline, in terms of the presentation on what to expect, Martin has already highlighted a few things that we expect to learn at the end of this presentation. But just to reiterate, as we are on this call today, let's have an open and receptive mindset. Let's be open to learn. Let's ask questions as much as possible, because at the end of the day, we want to support with the implementation to meet the deadline that has been stipulated by the Bank of Ghana. So just by an overview, what we expect to see today is just to look at the background, touch on what the key things are and what BoG requires of us, also give some context as to why these directives are important for us. We'll then touch on what the key requirements are. As Martin has already highlighted, we'll touch on the composition of the board, we'll look at internal controls, we'll also look at the risk management aspect of it and what we need to do as PSPs. And the next thing we'll touch on what the key next steps are, more of an implementation guideline on what we can do to meet the deadline. And also we'll look at how KPMG can support with this transformational journey and just more of a knowledge check just to be sure that we have properly assimilated what would be discussed today. Now, our facilitators for today are Henry Okine, who is a manager with the governance risks and compliance team. He's had over 5 years of extensive experience in terms of driving governance across various industries in Ghana. He's a manager with the governance risks and compliance services at KPMG. To support him on this is Belinda Asem, who is also an assistant manager with the governance risks and compliance team at KPMG. All right, so having said that, I would like to hand over to Henry. He will take us through the background and some aspects of the requirements, what we are expected to do as PSPs. Belinda will take over from there and also touch on what the key steps are and take us through the transitional roadmap. And then I'll come back with the knowledge check. But just before I hand over to them, if you have any questions along the presentations, please drop it in the chat box. Once we are done, I'll read it out. If you also need any clarity, any questions that you have back in your mind, just drop it in the chat box and we'll take a look at it right after the presentation. Because what we want to do today is to ensure that once you're leaving this session, you are going fully empowered to be able to implement these guidelines that have been outlined for us. Patience, I see Patience has a hand up, so you can hear from her beforehand. Hello, Patience. Hello, Patience. She can unmute and speak. Oh, she says she can't hear. Hello, Henry, please, can you hear me?
Yes, Rohina, I can hear you.
Okay, so Patience just gave a feedback. She says she can't hear. Patience, please check your network connectivity and confirm if you can hear. All right, thank you all. So Henry, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rohina. Thank you, Martin. Has been a very good introduction to this webinar. You and Martin have given a good foundation to this webinar, and what can we say more? And we'll just give some little more detail to it, but I think I believe Martin and Rohina have given a very good introduction to it, and I and Belinda will add on to it as needed. So as Rohina and Martin stated, the Ghana fintech and payment ecosystem is evolving, and with this growth, there needs to be some robust oversight. And as Martin said, in recognition of this, BoG, as mandated by the Act 987, has issued these corporate governance guidelines for the PSPs. And these set some clear expectations for the board composition, governance, especially risk governance, compliance, and accountability. And as they also said, the guidelines are not just about compliance, but they're to ensure long-term sustainability, investor confidence, and also consumer trust. That's why BoG has set these guidelines and have taken their time to release them and given us enough period to implement them. And as you know, these guidelines shall apply to all the regulated entities or institutions licensed by BoG under the Act 987, who have been licensed to participate in a digital payments ecosystem. And these categories include the dedicated electronic money issuers, the DMIs, the enhanced payments service providers, medium payment service providers, the payment schemes, the payment and financial technology service providers, and any other category as may be prescribed by the Bank of Ghana. As Martin also said, these guidelines effective from the 31st of December 2025 and seek to enhance the governance framework of PSPs. So we'll delve into the objectives of these guidelines, why even we are applying them or implementing them, and why BoG even brought them. So it's the objectives of these guidelines require regulated institutions to adopt effective governance culture, principles, structures, and practices that will protect the interests of all stakeholders. And this will ensure that the PSPs have clear, effective governance framework with defined rules and for board management and key committees. Martin reiterated on that, it's clearly stated the rules for the board management, the directors, the key committees. Also to inspire, strengthen public trust and confidence in the digital financial ecosystem. Also to enable the regulated entities carry out their licensing business in an environment of trust, focus on trust, transparency, and accountability. So these are three keywords they have stated: trust, transparency, and accountability. That necessary for sustainable, that's necessary for the sustainability of their licensing business. And also finally to promote the safety and effectiveness of the digital financial ecosystem. So in summary, as we have said, Martin has said, Rohaina has said, the key things: to strengthen governance structures, to promote ethical conduct and accountability, to improve transparency and also disclosure. And also key is to foster long-term institutional sustainability. We want to see a sustainable ecosystem, we want to see sustainable providers of these payment services. So delve into it more. We know that I guess most of us have been divided into 5 parts. And these parts are the part 1, which the preliminary that talks about application and the objectives of the guidelines. Part 2, the relevant legal requirements, kind of provides context on legal requirements for all directors of these PSPs. Part 3, sound governance, corporate governance standards. You could see that they're leveraging all the corporate governance standards from Kin 4 to the OECD principles. You've seen that developing this document just didn't come from Ghana. It came from leveraging principles that have been accepted in the globe and the world. Part 4, remedial measures and sanctions, outline sanctions and remedial measures. And part 5, the transitional provisions. These provisions for the smooth and effective transition during the issuance of the directive. So we go deeper and to unpack more governance requirements in more detail. And we look at the qualifications and the disqualification and approvals. Like, what are the requirements for these PSPs? And next, we'll look at the critical areas we have to pay attention for the appointment of directors in the guidelines. So we'll look at that, and we'll also, BoG has made it clear that strong boards are the foundation of effective governance. The tone at the top is very important. So they clearly stated a whole section towards qualification, disqualification, and approvals. So they have made it clear that strong boards are always the foundation for effective governance. So we have to also take note of this section. And they made it clear that it's just not having qualifications on paper, but to be able to demonstrate integrity, independence, and commitment needed to guide institutions to make them more sustainable. So in this section, we'll look at what the guideline says about who qualifies to be a director of a PSP, who does not qualify, whether, and this is not just for the people setting up boards right now, it's for people reviewing their boards, or reviewing the composition of their boards, or preparing for even an assessment, because we know that most PSP have boards already, but we want to assess them. So, and this section is not just for people who are setting up their boards now, but people who are reviewing their composition as at now and are preparing for an assessment. So we cannot afford to overlook this section. Yeah. So key to this, qualifications. So according to the guidelines, directors must meet some minimum standards of competence, integrity, and commitment, that I've said, to even be eligible for appointment. First and foremost, these keywords, fit and proper. Directors must be fit and proper. BoG has already released their fit and proper directive some years ago that guides the regulated and deposit-taking entities on how fit and proper is key. Directors have to be able to demonstrate integrity, honest, and competence. And as we know, BoG reserves the right to conduct background checks on all nominees of these, all nominees who have been nominated to be directors in these entities. Also, for qualification, BoG has clearly stated experience and knowledge. Directors are supposed to possess some relevant skills and industry knowledge. As you know, directors are supposed to possess some skills relevant to the sector, and as a whole, have some diverse expertise. So one director cannot more or less have all these expertise. So as a board, as a whole, you have some diverse expertise in finance and IT and governance. So and legal, we have legal people on the board. So as a whole board, make sure the composition, as Belinda will go deeper into it, we should have a diverse board which can cater for all the needs or guidelines stated. And also the qualifications should qualify, it should align with the institutional size and complexity. The qualification should align with the institution size and complexity, because we have different sizes of PSPs, different sizes of people in this ecosystem. And finally, one thing that is key to this aspect of the section on qualification is qualification especially is time commitment. We need directors who are committed, who have time to serve, who are active and dedicated, because their guidance is necessary for sustainability. And the keyword is sustainability. We need directors who are committed, who are active and are dedicated to the role they have been appointed for. We can also go to the disqualifications. I'll throw a little light on it. The directive also sets some clear exclusions. Individuals with a record of insolvency, fraud, or prior removal from office are disqualified. So others barred from such rules include people with mental incapacity, individuals under the age of 18, people currently serving as a director or key management personnel in other licensing institution by BoG. And here to reiterate on it, people who have been convicted of any offense involving fraud, dishonesty cannot qualify for it. We just be clear on our qualification criteria, who you are looking for to sit on your board. You have to make sure they are in compliance with these guidelines BoG has stated. So in summary, I would say that these directors we are appointing or giving these roles or nominating for BoG to give final approval are not just figureheads, and not just people we should just put on our boards, but they must be credible, experienced, and as I said, actively engaged, as time and commitment to these boards is very necessary. So directors are not just figureheads. As the requirement said, they should have to be credible, they have to be experienced, and they have to be actively engaged. So BoG wants to see people or boards that are not just well structured with figureheads. We need to see people who pass integrity tests, people who understand the sector and the capacity to provide oversight as needed. So I'll leave Belinda to give more detail on the key provisions of these guidelines, what we should expect to adhere to and what we should comply to, and how the transition should go. So Belinda will come in and give some more clarity on key provisions as stated in the guidelines.
Thank you, Henry. Can you confirm if you can hear me? We are having some comments saying you keep losing us. Please confirm if you can hear. maybe with a reaction. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next part of our section delves deep into what the corporate governance standards that BoG has released are. And this section is what is found in part 3 of the directive. So for us, we have categorized it into 3 parts. We talk about the board governance and composition. Then we'll talk about key management personnel. We'll also look at risk management and compliance. Now, under board governance and composition, the various aspects are, it's covering board responsibility, it's covering the board charter. It's also looking at what the key structure of and composition of the board is supposed to look like, what kind of operations the board is supposed to conduct or have, the kind of committees the board is supposed to have. We also look at separation of powers, the tenure of executive and non-executive directors or directors on the board in general. It also defines independent directors and who can be qualified as an independent director. We also look at what succession planning is. Under key management personnel, it talks about the appointments of key management personnel. It moves on to also give us the role of the MD or CEO. It also clarifies some other specific key management personnel. Yes. Then moving on to risk management and compliance section, it goes to talk about compensation system, internal controls, disclosure, transparency, ethics, and a cooling off period that BoG has specified, and also declaration and certification of board members. Now, we'll go on into the various sections as we have divided them. Straight into the board governance and composition part. We are looking at composition. Now, what's BoG considering a board and what kind of board must a PSP have? We are looking at a minimum of 3 members on the board, with at least 2 of them, including the CEO, residents in Ghana. So, least number on the board 3, with 2 of them residents in the country, in Ghana, and 1 of them should include the CEO. So it means that we cannot have a non-resident CEO, and we cannot have more than all board members who are non-residents in the country. Also, a majority of the members are supposed to be non-executive directors. Now, non-executive directors are those who do not have executive function in the business or in the company, meaning that you don't have a day-to-day responsibility with the company. So most or majority of the board members must be non-executive directors. It also prescribes that at least 1/3 of the members must be independent directors. And that specifically is for the DEMIs and then enhanced PSPs. Then not more than 1/3 of the members must be related. So we cannot have more than 1/3 of the board members being relatives or friends in some regard. Yes. Then 2 related persons can also hold board chair and CEO positions. So we cannot have a father as chair and then a son as CEO. And that's what the directive is prescribing. Now let's delve into who an independent director is. As I stated earlier, majority of the members must be NEDs, which are non-executive directors. So definitely an independent director must be a non-executive director. And that person will not have to hold more than 5% equity directly or indirectly of the business. So anyone who holds more than 5% equity interest cannot be qualified or cannot be termed as an independent director. And to have an independent director on the board, then that person must not hold more than 5% equity. Also, the person must not have been employed in an executive position at least 2 years prior. So we cannot have a person who has served in a key management position prior 2 years earlier, appointed as an independent director on the board. There would have to be some cooling off period to show that that person is truly independent. We can also have relatives as key management personnel in the institution if you are an independent director. You cannot be engaged in any transaction that is in less favorable terms. And those transactions should not have occurred within the last 2 years. So an independent director must be someone whose interest is not conflicting with what the interest of the business is. Must be totally independent. I mean, the word independent means that what you do would not affect the business. So independent directors must align in that order. You must also be related to the shareholders or any person that is on the board originally or already. Yes, so those are independent directors, and that's the definition that the directive is given. Now, what's the tenure that has been prescribed for non-executive directors on the board? They have a term of 4 years, and it can be renewable for an additional 2 terms, meaning that non-executive directors can serve up to 12 years on the board. Alternate directors are directors who can be appointed by another director. So let's say, for instance, I have been appointed as a director on any PSP board. I can appoint another person in my stead to serve as an alternate director for no more than 6 months, maybe because I have to be absent for some time. So I can appoint another director who also have voting rights and have all the rights I would have had as a director on the board. However, that person cannot serve for more than 6 months on the board. Now, moving on into the kind of board activities that are expected. The board is supposed to hold meetings, and under meetings, they are to have at least a meeting each quarter, and at least 2/3 of the board members must be present for the meeting. That means that a quorum is 2/3, and majority of that should be non-executive directors. Minutes must be taken during the meetings, and those minutes must be signed by both the board chair and the secretary, and must be submitted to Bank of Ghana within 10 days or after 10 days after the board has approved those meeting minutes. It's also important to note that the directive talks about board evaluation, where as a board, we do not just continue with our affairs without looking back on how well we have performed or how we have performed as directors individually and the committees as a whole. And so the directive is prescribing annual board evaluations where the board sits to analyze what they have done, their performance over the year, and then every 3 years, it is expected that you have external facilitators come in to do or perform that evaluation for you. Also, under induction and training, it's required that there's a structure that has directors onboarded and also trained. So we cannot have directors come on not knowing what is expected of them, knowing more about the business that they are about to oversee, and also the kind of performance it has had over the years and what's expected of them in terms of strategy. So induction is very, very important for directors, and the directive is prescribing that we have a structured onboarding system where directors are properly onboarded and also trained when there's a need. And also it specifies that every 4 years, directors must be certified with corporate governance. So you must undertake a corporate governance certification with the National Banking College or any external facilitator or institution that the Bank of Ghana recognizes as excellent in providing corporate governance trainings. Yeah. Under succession planning, it talks about having a well-structured plan to ensure that transition or smooth running of roles from one person to another is there, it's existent, such that we'll not have a key management personnel resigning, and we don't have any structure in place to replace that person or have that person's position filled. So the role will not be vacant, leaving responsibilities in those areas, more or less. So succession planning is very important, and it's part of the things that BoG is prescribing that boards should put in place. Now, talking about who is supposed to be in the board, we'll look at the board officers and the kind of committees that the directive is prescribing. Now, every board must have a board chair, and BoG is stating in the directive that this board chair can serve a term of 4 years, which can be renewable for 1 term, which means that or someone selected as a board chair can only be a board chair for 8 years. Unlike for being a non-executive director, you can be a director for 12 years. You can only be a board chair for 8 years. Now, the board chair is responsible for setting agenda for board meetings in collaboration with the board secretary. The board chair is also supposed to promote a culture of openness. The board chair is also to develop and also oversee implementation of the induction plan, training plan, and development of all directors. So board chair essentially is supposed to ensure that there is growth amongst the directors. They are well abreast with what they are required to do and expected to do, and also ensure that the board is very effective in performing their responsibilities. I've been speaking about the board secretary, and the board secretary is very, very important to a board. The board secretary is an interface between the board and management, meaning that taking information from management to present to the board, and also whatever information that has been discussed during board meetings or discussed with the board chair, the secretary is responsible for collating that information and sharing with management. So the secretary serves as an interface between the board and management. When it comes to certain legal requirements that the board is supposed to perform, the secretary is also the one supposed to serve as an advisor to the board on those matters, as well as governance matters. For DEMIs and EPSPs, that's Enhanced Payment Service Providers, it's required that the appointment of a board secretary is in line with what the Companies Act says. Now, the Companies Act specifies that a board secretary can be a lawyer or someone who has had secretarial responsibilities and has been certified as one with experience as a board secretary. So those are the categories of people that as DEMIs and EPSPs need to consider when they are appointing board secretaries. However, for the other types of payment service providers, it's not clearly stated what kind of board secretary needs to be appointed, but a qualified person must be appointed. Now, the directive also talks about committees, and committees are more or less divisions within the same board to make sure that focus on different aspects of the business are looked at. And for this directive, 2 committees are specifically stated. We must have an audit committee and then a risk and compliance committee, meaning that those 2 at a minimum must be present for the board. And any additional committee can be included as you go along as a board and as your business expands. If there's a need to have other committees that speak to or address specific areas within the business, those committees can be established on the board. Now, delving deep into what does the committee have to look like? For the audit committees, the directive specifies that it must consist of at least 2 non-executive directors, and the person to chair the audit committee must be an independent director. We've already gone through what the definition of an independent director is. Also, Audit committee members must have competencies in at least finance, accounting, auditing, and information systems. And they would have oversight over internal and external audit functions within the business. Also, for the risk and compliance committees, they must have competencies in risk management, finance, accounting, information technology, and any other business skill that will be relevant to the committee's work. They will have oversight over risk and compliance functions. Now, specifically, the board's responsibilities have been stated by in the directive, and the board is generally responsible for strategic decisions, stakeholder management, things regarding budget, considering and approving the budget, also looking at internal control, risk management policies, code of conduct, and looking at acquisitions and investments beyond a certain percentage. So for the board of generally, as prescribed by the directive, they have to approve significant amounts of acquisitions and divestments that are of 10% or more of the value of the company or value of investments that the company has. However, for them, it's required that it to be around 5%. So the board needs to approve for any form of acquisition or investment that will be done when it is 5% or more of the company's value. The board is also responsible for approving financial statements, reviewing reports from key management personnel, also setting KPIs for key management personnel, and monitoring the performance of key management personnel based on the KPIs that have been set. The board is also supposed to set the tone for ethical standards within the business and the company. And specifically, the directive mentions that the board is supposed to report to BoG whenever it comes up that the business cannot go on or the company needs to fold up. BoG needs to be notified. If you are not meeting obligations as a business, BoG needs to be notified. If you have to suspend a payment or a particular product, BoG needs to be notified. The board is also responsible for checking for external auditors or appointing external auditors. Now, it specifically says that the external auditors cannot serve for more than 6 years, and they are eligible for reappointment after they had cooled off for at least 5 years. So you cannot have an auditor for more than 6 years, an external auditor for more than 6 years, and you can only reappoint that external auditor after that external auditor has served a cool-off period of 5 years or more. Now, with all of these that we have spoken about the responsibilities and the positions and the composition, it's essential that it needs to be documented somewhere. And that documentation is specifically the board charter, which is a very, very important document that every board needs to have. It speaks to who qualifies to be on the board. It speaks to what kind of committees are on the board, what's expected of the board, the kind of matters that are delegated to the board, the kind of matters delegated to management, and succession plan, induction. I mean, everything related to corporate governance needs to be documented in what we call a board charter. And the directive specifically mentions that boards need to have this board charter. Boards need to have this board charter. And this board charter needs to be reviewed every 3 years. So where there are new directives or where there's an improvement in directive or there are new corporate governance requirements, the board needs to ensure that that charter is reviewed and those new directives are included in the board charter. Now, the same thing applies to committees. When it comes to committees, we also have to document a charter or what we call terms of reference for the committees. It specifies the modalities of the committee's work. So it talks about when they meet, how they meet, who sets the agenda, the composition of that committee, who can be on the committee, and all of those requirements. So it's essential to note that board charter and committee charters or committee terms of references are very, very important to have on the board. Now we'll delve into key management personnel, what the directive says concerning key management personnel. So just like directors, before a key management personnel is appointed, they need to be approved by the Bank of Ghana. And a comprehensive due diligence report should have been done or submitted to Bank of Ghana for Bank of Ghana to issue an approval for such person to be appointed as key management personnel.